Welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. Tonight's lineup of emails will take us from the Rocky Mountains to central Pennsylvania. So grab your snackage, load 'em up, and let's move out. Our journey to Sasquatch Valley starts right now. Hello. I lived on the west side of the Rocky Mountains between the summer of 1972 and the summer of 1979. During that time, my siblings and I were all taught how to hunt and skin a deer and a bear, along with processing the meat, and how to catch a fresh brook trout, and how to clean and cook it. Basically, we lived a true mountain life. I can remember being extremely happy as it was free time after school and chores. We were surrounded by the Rocky Mountains, trees and brush as far as the eye could see. It was every adventurous child's dream, to be honest. There were many streams and lakes in that area where I spent those years. One particular evening after school, one of my older siblings and one younger sibling and myself decided to head to a water tower. This particular water tower was approximately half a mile from the residence that we lived in. At the time, it was a standard-sized 40-foot-high tower with a ladder, and everything being metal. The day that we had gone to the tower, we were looking at the wild strawberries, and my older siblings started hollering at us to get to the top of the water tower. My younger sibling and I were shoved through the metal plate that blocks the staircase to get to the top of the tower, as we were all quite young and slender. I believe I was 9 years old at the time. I kept trying to turn around, but in my head, I didn't see anything. Or maybe I was so scared that I blocked out the unusual encounter. We got to the top of the tower, and my older sibling, following close behind, sat next to us. I was scared, and I didn't even know why I was scared. So I turned to my sibling and I asked, "Why did you push us up here?" My sibling looked at me and said, "Didn't you see it?" I saw nothing that I could remember at that moment and time. My younger sibling and I peered over the edge of the water tower, looking down, and all I remember seeing were timber wolves. I was very scared at that point and started hollering for my older siblings to come get us. Short time later, they arrived, but no timber wolves. There was nothing out of the ordinary. We went home, and we never discussed this again. Here I sit 48 years later, and I saw a picture of what someone put on a Bigfoot Encounter webpage, and it was like I had déjà vu. I remember seeing that face on that day that we were at the water tower. I finally remembered what I saw. I immediately called my older sibling, and I asked them if this is what they saw. They agreed that that's exactly what they saw. They also said that there was a very bad stench in the air. Of course, I don't remember that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to ask my younger sibling, as they are now deceased. After thinking about everything, I realized that a Sasquatch came out of the woods, rushing my siblings and I to the top of the water tower to save us from the timber wolves. Now, how can you say thank you to a creature you may or may never see again? I'm very appreciative of them as I got to grow up with my siblings, and I hope God watches over them as they continue to guard our forests. That's all for now. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. Sign me, VMGC in Montana. I can hardly believe I'm writing this email. First, I never believed in these things. I was hunting last November in central Pennsylvania. It's private land that I do not own, so I can't be more exact than that. The terrain there is hilly and heavily wooded. Now, previous hunts over the years there have yielded very good game. There's a shared private access road to get to the property. It's a rough road that will take you up and down some rugged terrain. I get back there in my Jeep Wrangler okay. There's an area to park, and you know where that area is, because you really can't go any further. I usually make camp within sight of my Jeep. That's so if things get bad out there, the Jeep can keep me dry or warm, or at least get me out of there. I know some guys that like to hunt and camp way out on that property. For some reason, I never did. You can try to call me a scaredy cat, but I'm anything but that. There was just something about staying out there that always gave me the willies. I don't mean that the dark scares me, not at all. There was just something about those hills and woods that chilled my blood. I never had this when I stayed in Oregon or hunted up in Washington, just on this piece of land in Pennsylvania. It was good hunting, though, so camping near the Jeep and not out in the hills was my compromise. Now, the first day out, it was a fine day. It was clear but cold. There was 0 deer sign anywhere. I had never had that out there before. Usually, that place is jumping with deer. I didn't even see any old scrapes. I saw no droppings or tracks, not even down by the creek, and they were always there. A little puzzled, I went to sleep that night, then got up. Day 2, I headed further to the interior of the property. I reasoned overnight that maybe the deer had been hunted out along the edges of the property, and they were all further inland. That morning it was very overcast and gray, colder than the day before. There were also a lot of shifting breezes that were kicking up leaves everywhere. You heard the rustle all around you. Once or twice I thought I smelled fresh wood smoke, so I was gearing up, prepared to walk up on people, maybe some that shouldn't be there on that land. So I was going slow and being very cautious. I did not want to get shot by accident or on purpose. And yes, I was wearing my hunting oranges. I followed a known creek at the bottom of 2 hills. Now the smell of wood smoke was stronger and almost continuous. It had to be close by. I stopped when I heard the clacking of rocks pounding together further down the creek. These rock sounds weren't chaotic or mindless. They were spaced, not to mimic a song or a beat. I mean, they had the sound of being used with purpose. I moved further into the trees and off the creek bank for more cover. I waited for a few moments, and with patience I was rewarded with the sound of what I could only call a voice. I couldn't make out what was being said. I listened very hard, and then I realized the voices I heard, well, they were not like other voices. These were deep, but they sounded stretched and warped, hitting highs and lows that were not normal or natural for a human. The bushes had lost most of their foliage that fall, but a few were still half-leafed out. I saw what I thought was a man, a large man, in a strange-looking camo suit further down the creek bank. Quickly I got behind a bush that still had plenty of leaves on it, and while the bush hid me, it also partially blocked my view of further down the bank. He was approximately 30 yards down the bank from me, but even from where I was, crouched behind a bush, I could see he was way taller and much bigger built than me. I looked on for a few more seconds, and the more I looked, the less I was sure that I was looking at a human. I then got a better look at the second one. It was dressed or leafed out the same, if you want to call it that, some kind of strange, weird camo. But what I looked at was a much smaller version, like it was younger. Its body was slimmer and lighter looking. It was sitting on the creek bank, while the other one was standing over it. I couldn't see what it was doing, but that's where the rock clacking sounds were coming from. I could see its arms moving, the shoulders rotating, but I couldn't see what was in its hands. They were in front of it. I mostly had a view of its side and back. But every time those arms pulled and the shoulders rolled, I heard a rock clack. The bigger one was standing over the smaller one, and it seemed to be giving encouragement or maybe directions, maybe both. At one point, the larger one suddenly squatted down and became more hands-on, grabbing the smaller one's arms as if to show him something. But again, I couldn't see what was going on. I then discovered where all that wood smoke I had been smelling was coming from. When the larger one moved and squatted down by the smaller one, I saw that behind him had been a small fire, maybe a few feet away, right there on the creek bank. When the larger one squatted down to tell or show the smaller one something, I saw him throw something toward the fire as he stood up. I don't know if it was something that he got from the creek, from the younger one, or what it was that he had thrown. It was small enough I couldn't see it, but I saw the action of throwing, and I saw something go into the fire. It was during that time that I was certain now the figures on the creek bank were not human at all, and I wondered how I ever thought they were. There had been a moment at first that I did try to see them as humans, because, well, I suppose that's what I expected to see, didn't I? I was prepared to see other hunters. But there was a second that came when I knew that wasn't the case. There was that second that I knew I was looking at some type of Bigfoot. I may not have said that exact word, the word Bigfoot, in my head, but I knew it. That weird camo suit, well, that was some long, shaggy-looking fur with a strange pattern and weird markings, the two colors of brown mixed together. One was more chocolate brown, and the other was more a rusty orange brown. If mid-season camo gear mated with some old shag carpet from the 70s, that's what their fur looked like. They were built to be powerful. I could see that. Even the young one showed signs that it would be as big as the other one standing over it. Maybe I could have fished my binoculars out of my pocket and checked them out closely. But truthfully, looking at them was as close as I wanted to get from that distance. Just looking at them made my skin crawl. My only reaction was to get away from them, to get away from that area. Now, I had been prepared to confront some people, or maybe even some poachers. I'm no stranger to confrontations or dangerous situations. I retired from the Marines. I am combat tested. I was with the Dark Horse Battalion. That is the 1st Marine Division, 3rd Battalion, 5th Regiment. If you know our history, then you know I am capable of handling a lot of different situations that are being thrown to me. As many combat veterans will tell you, you do develop a type of a self-preservation, sort of a sixth sense. I can't describe it any better than that. You know when to dig in and do battle. You know when to creatively move that engagement to a more advantageous setting, and you know when it's time to fall back. You don't think about it in those exact terms. You just instinctively know those things. And right then, I was getting the fall back hunch. I didn't know if the two that I had in my sight were the only ones around. There could have been more combatants in the area unseen. I had no other eyes to watch around my clock face. I had no intel of any kind. I was entirely uninformed on the target of engagement before me. I didn't know how they might react to certain engagements or stimuli. And at the moment, they exhibited zero hostility. They were no threat, and there was nothing I needed to acquire from them. Those are all things that told me to walk it back out right then. I had eyes on them for about 60 seconds solid, and then I made my decision to vacate the area. I left the area, as far as I know, undetected. I got to my camp, took a breather, cleared my head, and I went over everything. After some quick thought, I decided my best move was to leave the area completely. I suspected they were the reason for no deer in the area, although I didn't know that for sure. I really didn't know anything about them before that day, at least in terms of their habits or how they might affect the game population. I have since read that game often departs an area where they are found. I also based my decision to leave because of that fire. I reasoned that if they know how to use fire, they can and probably are using some form of tools, even if it's what we would call crude tools. And to me, that meant they were a human type. I don't know all the science or the classifications, and I really don't care. I knew I did not want to compete with them, and I did not want to harm them if I did not have to. In my years, I've had to shoot many times when I did not want to, but I did not have a choice. I had to engage. But I had a choice that day. I decided not to engage. I decided to walk away and to vacate the area completely. Now, I have gotten some flack for that decision from about half the people that I have told this encounter to. The man who owned the land at first did not believe me. He told me not to drink or do anything else while I'm out there hunting. I curtly reminded him that I do not partake of alcohol at all. I wouldn't even toast with champagne at my own wedding. I informed him I drank sparkling white grape juice, and that's true. I came from a family of alcoholics, and I do not have good memories. Growing up, I swore that I would never touch alcohol, and as God is my witness, I never have. I don't touch anything else either that can alter your reality, if you get my meaning. But lo and behold, some months later, I was talking to that same man again, and out of the blue, he asked me again about that day. He asked about my last time and what I saw. I was taken aback, surprised, you might say, given his previous reaction. He listened carefully. Then he asked several questions. Then it came out, and he told me that his great-nephew had been out there and came back with a similar story. But he had been chased out of the woods by those things, and they were throwing rocks at him as they chased him, yelling. Now, there's a lot more to that whole story, but it's more about his nephew, and it really isn't important. The important thing is those Bigfoot, they are there in Pennsylvania, at least on that land. They were back then. I am told they are gone now, just to keep the record clean. I know because I went scouting this September 2024. I went out there because that man told me that a few other men had gone searching for them over the last winter and into the spring. They found them, supposedly, and apparently they ran them off the land. They've scouted many times and have not seen any more of them at all. I myself just scouted in September of this year, as I mentioned, and once again I saw a plentiful sign of deer. I plan to hunt there over the next month or two and into the winter. If I see other signs, well, you know I will write in and let you know. When I think about this encounter, I think about the fire the most. What did it mean? What does it mean? Does it mean anything? I have never heard of them using fire. I wondered if it could have been a strange strike of lightning or something that they took advantage of. There had been no rain that I knew of. But I just can't imagine that they know how to make fire. Can anyone out there tell me if you've heard of that? Semper Fi. Call me Teufelhund or Devil Dog. Hey, thanks to both of you for those incredible emails. And to answer you, Devil Dog, I personally have not heard of them using fire. I do recall hearing of them using clubs and some other types of primitive type tools. But the fire? Well, that's a first for me. What about you, Sasquatch? Have you heard it? Let us know in the comments below. Well, my Sasquatch, we've had another successful journey down into Sasquatch Valley, and I have loved having your company tonight. And we'll be getting together again soon. But you know, I have to remind you that until we do meet up again, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.